This is the Television Enthusiast Podcast, The Weekly Set.
Episode 6, recorded March 5th, 2015.
Welcome to the Television Enthusiast Podcast, The Weekly Set. I am joined here today by Will.
Hello.
And Kat.
Hi.
Lee cannot join us today, but she should be with us next week. Okay, so let's kind of get started. Instead of going on with news first, I think I just want to jump right into what we've been watching, because we weren't able to really talk about that for the last couple weeks.
Sounds good.
Right.
So, Will, I hear you caught up on Agent Carter, and that just concluded a week ago. Kat, you caught up as well, right?
Yeah, I've watched the whole thing.
Okay, so what does everybody think?
It was good. It was a really well done series. I thought, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I definitely hope it comes back.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked it up until the last couple of episodes, which I thought were maybe a bit weaker than the rest of the season. But but I had a ton of fun. I think especially when anything involving Peggy as the double agent sneaking around with Jarvis was just a total blast.
Oh yeah. Peggy and Jarvis together, that relationship was like the highlight of the series for me.
Amen.
Yeah.
Season 2 is just going to be like a buddy sitcom with the two of them.
I wouldn't mind that one bit.
It's going to be all, Agent Carter is recorded before a live studio audience.
Funny
James
enough,
Darcy is really funny as Jarvis, so, I bet they
he
could pull it
is.
off.
He really pulls it off.
Can you imagine them talking with like a laugh track in the background?
Oh yeah.
That might get a bit uncomfortable after a certain point. But the season finale certainly set themselves up for another season, so I'm crossing my fingers like they're certainly optimistic. I would really like to see another season.
I haven't looked at the ratings on it, so I don't know how it did. Will, have you seen the ratings? Or
I haven't looked at the ratings, but then again, I don't generally look at ratings of stuff I'm watching.
From what I've read, I think it did slightly less than they were hoping for, but I think still pretty decently for its time slots.
Nice. Yeah. Funny enough, I thought the finale was like the weakest episode.
I agree.
Yeah. It just didn't seem to be like up to the standards of the rest of the season, for whatever reason.
I think was it the penultimate that had where the boss dove out the window?
Yeah,
it was.
I liked that. I liked that they were able to take these kind of characters that were kind of sexist kind of buffoons and kind of give a little bit more depth to them, so that there's like you feel for him and when he's going through that, and you know that you can respect him for his heroism, and he kind of makes amends with Peggy in a way. Before that, they kind of come to see things in the same way, before he has to kill himself.
Well, yeah, and it gives his death impact, because if we didn't care about his character, then that death would have been kind of like, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, that was like, one of my complaints from the pilot was like, that the SSR agents seemed kind of like cardboard, and I'm glad that by the time
Interchangeable?
Interchangeable, yeah. And I'm glad that by the time this episode happened, they actually built them up and made us care for these characters, especially the Chief, to where that his death did have the impact that it needed to have.
I had the same problem as you, like for the first 3 episodes. I think the only reason I could tell any of them apart is because I'm already familiar with Chad Michael Murray. They were all one SSR agent to me.
Right, exactly.
One big sexist entity.
And I also liked the villain that they introduced towards the end, the guy who could kind of like mind control people just by getting like in their heads.
The guy, he twists his ring around and makes that soothing sound. And
and it looks like they're setting him up for something significant.
They had a nice little cameo in the finale
Arnim
there.
Zola.
Yeah, very nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know how you felt, Will, but I was disappointed by the last 2 episodes in that I felt like the show kind of stopped being about Peggy. And I was like, it's her show, like it's in the title right there, and she kind of disappeared for large portions of the plot in the last couple of episodes. So I found myself enjoying them quite a bit less, because I thought they really lost her as the focus.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was like kind of odd, because she, I thought it's her show, so she's the one who's supposed to be putting everything together, saving the day. You know,
Yeah.
that blonde chick, I really want to see Peggy, like, kick her butt. I know that happened, but that was, like, the number one thing I was looking forward to. You know, so I thought that should have been a bigger emphasis on her in the last 2 episodes. It should, going into the finale.
Well, she got away, so that's kind of a setup for next season, I guess. Or,
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt going into the finale there should have been an even bigger emphasis on Peggy than even before.
So, Will, did you get that connection that Kat and I were talking about before, the MCU connection, or?
Arnim Zola? I don't think that was it. That was in the finale.
No, it has to do with Dottie.
Dottie.
Yeah.
The program that she's a part of?
The Leviathan?
Apparently the Easter egg goes by really fast. It's called the Black Widow program.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that.
Yeah. So that's been confirmed by the showrunners as well. So that is the same program that eventually,
sense.
Yeah.
Natasha Romanoff, yeah.
Yep.
Which makes me excited. I hope we learn more about her in regards to this in the next Avengers movie.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'd love to, like, explore her background.
I wonder if they're ever going to do a movie of just of hers, you know, because she's one of the big, you know, stars on it. She was a huge part of Cap 2 and...
I know, right? Black Widow is overdue for her own film.
And it could be a really different vibe too. It could totally be more, you know, I mean, Cap 2 kind of went in that direction a little bit,
like,
with the more espionage stuff, you know?
Yeah, it wouldn't be so much about big people with big superpowers. It would be...
It's not like Scarlett Johansson can't carry her own film.
Demonstrated just last summer.
She's kind of a no-name.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Who's heard of this Scarlett Johansson? I mean...
Who's that?
Well, and one other thing that kind of disappointed me about the Agent Carter finale is I really liked the setup of having Howard go off and he thinks he's going to rescue Steve and he's going to destroy New York or whatever. And Peggy has to talk him down and they both have to let go of Steve. But they didn't spend that much time over the course of the season. At least for me, I felt like giving the impression that the loss of Steve was something that was still really weighing on both of these characters. So that emotional moment wasn't very well earned for me.
Did you get a chance to watch Captain America yet, the first one?
I have, yeah.
Okay, you did, yeah. Okay, so I think that, you know, some of that kind of builds up through that, but, you know, I get what you're saying as well. There are a few moments where you can kind of see the kind of weight on, the reveal that that's what was in the container was, you know, a big thing for it. I agree, though, that they could have done a better job with that. It's the same thing kind of with, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. now, we were talking about in our impressions piece, that there's certain aspects that they just didn't quite fully execute well dealing with a character's death.
That's
without spoiling it for Will here, so...
That's one of the problems, I think, inherent with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that its stuff is connected to other stuff, and so sometimes something might have, like, more weight if you watch this other thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I feel that, that's a good point, because that's actually kind of how I feel about Loki and the Avengers, is I think Loki taken on his own in that movie is a pretty... I mean, Tom Hiddleston's fun in the role, but there's not much complexity to him as a villain, but if you take him in the context of the first Thor movie, he's actually way, way more interesting than that.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Because watching Thor, you get to learn what motivates him and what makes Loki Loki.
Exactly. And I know this is probably going to go against the grain of how a lot of people feel about the series, but I actually feel like Agent Carter could have benefited from having had more episodes. Because if they had, I think they could have spent more time with her being a double agent. They could have spent more time on examining the sexist angle, and they could have spent more time examining the emotional repercussions of having lost Steve. And I think if with more time for all of those components, I think it would have helped that finale.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say it should have like a full extra run of like,
not
you know,
even, yeah,
but
not
like
even
another couple
22.
episodes or something.
I mean, even just maybe like
Maybe
3
one
or
or two
4 more
more
episodes could have benefited from it.
It was
I feel
10
like
episodes, right?
It was 8 episodes.
Oh, 8 episodes.
And
yeah,
so,
so like a
like,
12 episode run would have probably been pretty good.
Yeah, I don't need a full run from it, but I think there were elements that could have used some more fleshing out. I see the benefit of having the shorter season, absolutely, but I kind of wish there had been more.
Right, that's kind of the inverse. If you go for too many episodes, you run out of material, you start to have like these filler episodes that don't do nothing. But then if you go shorter, you also run the risk of not having enough room to do everything properly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think they probably could have done it in the 8 episodes. There were a few kind of slow points in the series, and they could have ironed it out a little bit better. But I'm with you on that. I think that if it had been, you know, even like Game of Thrones does like 10 episode seasons, like that could have, even 2 episodes, they could have done like an episode that dealt specifically with that. With like, they could have done like I mean, it would have been hard, but what if they had done like a flashback episode or something where they went into kind of events that happened, you know, during the time of Captain America that we didn't see in the actual movie?
Yeah.
Or something like that, you know, and you get like kind of little character focus moments or something.
Right.
That'd be hard because you'd have to get Chris Evans on it, you know, and stuff. But they also could have done something like that where they've gone directly after the events, you know, or like...
Oh, that would have been really interesting, dealing with the immediate emotional fallouts.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Steve's loss. That could have been really great.
Yeah.
That could have been fantastic. That's a missed opportunity for sure.
And who knows? I mean, they could still do that, you know?
Right.
There's still opportunity. I really hope it gets another season because it was amazing.
Well, and there's so much more material to be covered because they haven't even gone anywhere near the formation of S.H.I.E.L.D. yet.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. I mean, there's still a lot in between where we are at the end of the series and the formation of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that, so there's definitely a lot more to Peggy's story, so they can go on for seasons.
Oh, definitely. And that era is really interesting for comic books, you know, they call it the Silver Age in comic books, you know, and MCU has left some ties in with like Silver Age aspects, not just with, Captain America himself and stuff, but I mean, like the new Ant-Man movie that's coming up, it's like the second generation Ant-Man, and there's an older one, and there's going to be ties to Howard Stark with that, you know, so there's a lot of connections they can kind of exploit that kind of act as like building blocks for that. You know, what would be really interesting is just to see more of the kind of the impact that Captain America has had on like, you know, pop culture in America as this like iconic figure.
Right.
And we've gotten that a little bit with like the radio show and stuff, but that would be interesting to kind of explore as well, you know?
Yeah.
And you got like in the Avengers movie, Agent Coulson had like Captain America trading cards.
Yeah.
You know, so he was a big influence on pop culture, at least in that world.
And we had the radio dramas, which were one of my favorite parts of the whole series, you know? I love
they
that.
just felt so perfect for that time period.
Yeah,
like, that
I
was
love
a
that they
great way of
left in
contextualizing the 40s.
I love that they left in the sponsorships too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, so we seem to be in kind of universal agreement that, you know, Agent Carter worked out very well, but had struggled a little bit at the end, and, you know, it's still good though. I think overall, if you look at the whole season, I'd rate it pretty highly.
I'd recommend it.
Too.
I'd recommend it to anybody looking for, even if they don't know about the Marvel universe, that's still not knowledge you need to have. Anybody looking for a good action adventure show, I'd recommend checking that out.
Agreed.
Or even outside of the action, I know like you know, my sister is a good example. She's seen Captain America and she's seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She watches that, and she's seen Agent Carter. But that's it. She doesn't have any other exposure to the MCU. And I've been trying to get her to watch, like, you know, Cap 2 or, you know, because I think at least that she'd probably like, or you know, Avengers, just because she is a Joss Whedon fan. But it's really hard to kind of convince her to get in on that. But she's kind of so-so on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She's just not really into it that much. But she really got into Agent Carter. She really dug it. So
oh, great.
I think that shows it's a good example, as in she's not really into that much action stuff. I mean, she watches Game of Thrones and stuff, but she's more into, like, you know, what would be called masterpiece theater on PBS.
Okay. Downton Abbey.
Yeah, she's more into stuff like that, or Call the Midwife and stuff like that. She's big into those kind of shows, you know, and she watches, or, you know, she likes drama, so she'll watch, you know, she watches good TV. It's not that she doesn't watch good TV, but she's just not so much into the action-y kind of stuff, you know?
Right.
So it shows that there's kind of a use case for people that just aren't into that at all. Not just not into MCU, but just aren't even into necessarily action, because it kind of stands alone as a decent period piece show as well, I think.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, they nailed the period, definitely.
Yeah. Like I said before in one of the discussions that I really dug that they went into, like, the idea of, like, female dormitories, you know, and stuff like that. That's just something you don't really hear about that often. It's something that was real, that existed, you know, and it's something that's of a bygone age, you know. That's just not something we have anymore, but it's an interesting little slice of Americana of that time period.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked that too, because it was kind of it gave it a kind of refreshing take on the whole superhero genre, just because it was such a completely different era, because there's no superpowers for anyone involved, because the technology is so old school. It just made every facet of the show, like, completely refreshing and new. Because I think in the MCU, there's the risk of becoming a bit redundant from film to TV series, as much as fun as they are.
Definitely a risk of becoming redundant. Definitely. And yeah, it was such a refreshing change. You're right. Even though it's Marvel, there's not really any superpowers to speak of. Nobody's, like, performing any incredible feats.
There is some, you know,
it could be
sci-fi technology
there's
going
sci-fi
on with Howard Stark stuff. Yeah.
You could argue
but that makes it comic booky. That's appropriate for the genre.
You could argue that the one villain in the end had, like, a superpower, maybe.
In a sense, sure.
In a sense. But mostly it's just Peggy Carter relying on her wits and, you know, her physical martial arts skills to get her out of situations and to save the day.
And her classical British charm.
Yes.
So yeah, it's yeah, I really dug that show. I'd say it was probably, so far, probably my favorite new show of 2015. Even over Better Call Saul, which I really like, but I think with Better Call Saul, and I've heard this impression from other people as well, that the issue with Better Call Saul is that it is primarily a prequel, at least right now. And because of that, it kind of neuters off some of the tension.
Right.
You know, because I actually heard, what was it? It was on a IGN UK podcast, I think, and they were interviewing, what's his name? Mark Miller, I think. He's the writer of Kingsman and Kick-Ass.
Oh, yeah. He's a comic book writer, right?
Yeah, he's done a bunch of big stuff. He wrote Civil War.
Yeah, he wrote Civil War.
Oh, wow,
okay. And he was talking about Better Call Saul, and he brought up that point as well, which is that it's, you know, he has this kind of position that all prequels suck. That's kind of his main impression. And he brought up Better Call Saul as an example, as he said, it's really well done, it's really well written, it's really well paced, everything about it's good, but it's like, it's kind of neutered by the fact that you know kind of the eventual fate of his position, and you know.
Right.
It takes away a lot of the tension.
Because you're saying that, you know, Saul has to be, at this point, when Breaking Bad comes around, Saul is in a position And, so, going into Better Call Saul, Saul is eventually going to be in that position. He has to be there. Nothing can happen in the show that will change that.
And not just Saul, but also Mike, who's on the show, and
right.
so there's other things as well. So there's these other connections you can kind of make, and you also know that he's still in Albuquerque. He's going by a different name, but he's still in Albuquerque, so it's not like he gets rocked by some massive scandal, or, there's nothing that's like, that would displace him like that. That's like really huge that could happen. So there is that kind of limiting aspect to it. It's still a really good show. I'd say it's the better made show between the two.
I'd say it's still interesting as a character study, though.
Oh, it's still good. Yeah, it's great. It's just that I feel overall I enjoyed Agent Carter more than I'm enjoying Better Call Saul.
Even though technically Agent Carter is also a prequel.
Yeah.
But it's not a prequel to another specific events. It's sort of a prequel to an entire universe rather than to another series.
Right.
That is true. In one way it's a prequel, but in another way it's a sequel.
Yeah.
Right. So we kind of have that side going for it. Plus it's like I said, it's a mostly unexplored region, so it's not like it takes place a few years before the kind of main, timeline or something. It takes place like 50, 60 years before.
Right, where it happened.
Yeah, definitely.
And the only person we know confirmed to survive into the present is Peggy Carter herself anyway.
Well, and Jarvis has to survive to a degree because doesn't he help raise Tony somewhere?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, we don't know how that relates in the MCU. Like, we don't know if the MCU Tony Stark was raised by Jarvis.
Is that how it is in the comics?
I believe it is in the comics.
Okay.
I don't think it's not necessarily set in stone that that's the way it is in the MCU. He could have named the computer Jarvis after, like, stories from his father, like saying, his father had his trusted butler Jarvis, so he has his trusted butler Jarvis. It's
sure.
Like so we don't really know about that,
Yeah, sure. Well, all of your stuff about the comments that you're making about prequels it actually makes me think of Gotham, because I've seen some of those complaints lobbed at Gotham being that, like, there's an extent to which anyone familiar with the Batman universe knows where most of these characters are going to end up, so there isn't a whole lot of tension you can get out of their usage.
Well, one of the complaints I've heard recently about Gotham, I stopped watching it, so I missed like the Joker stuff, which I'm hearing a lot of people complain about now, I guess. And I missed that stuff because I stopped watching it, but
you didn't miss much.
One of the things that I've heard people complaining about is just the general idea that these characters are already at the kind of the state that they're,
Yeah, that they already are the Joker and the Riddler and the Penguin to a large extent.
There's no room for growth, really.
Yeah, this really, really bugs me, because in the original established Batman mythos, Gotham was always plagued by gangs, gang warfare.
The
mafiosos, up until Batman started becoming active. Once Batman took out the mafiosos, that's when you see the costume criminals like the Riddler and the Joker start coming out of the woodwork and taking the place of the mafia.
It was always kind of portrayed as that their existence is partially, Batman's partially at fault for their existence.
Right.
They're a response to Batman rather than Batman entering a world in which they already exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. That was kind of one of my issues going into the series, is like everyone saying, we can finally get Batman out of the way and explore the villains of the Batman universe. And my response was pretty much every single Batman movie that's been made, with the exception of Batman Begins, has done that exact thing. So I don't know why we're saying this is a new thing.
Batman has always played second fiddle in his own movies.
Awesome. Especially when the Joker shows up.
Right. The Joker shows. I mean...
I'm a bit more interested in kind of the psyche of Bruce Wayne in the immediate days following the death of his parents. Like, I think that's an interesting new angle.
So do you think season 2 is going to be like a 10-year time skip or something?
Let's hope not.
You're gonna see like, all the main actors with like fake receding hairlines and aged up, and an adult Bruce comes to town.
Oh, that would be a bad idea. I don't know. I feel really bad for Gotham because I think what I really like about it is I think it has a great tone in terms of like the atmosphere. The visual aesthetic is exactly what you would want Gotham to be, and I think it's reflected on every level. The production design, all of that is great, and their cast is utterly fantastic. I think their casting director deserves tons of awards because even like their guest actors are just spot on perfect. But the writing is just constantly letting them down. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, the writing, that was the last straw for me. That was the thing that I just could not take on that show, was the writing, and just not even just the dialogue writing, because the dialogue's pretty bad too, but the characterization, it's no good.
I really think the show should have been primarily about young James Gordon, dealing with a corrupt police department while trying to take down the mob, and his rise through the ranks, how he manages to clean up the Gotham PD, all leading up to, when Batman starts to become active. The series can end like right before Batman comes into play. But it should have been about that. It should have stuck to that premise. They didn't have to shoehorn in all these Batman villains that don't really belong at all.
Penguin kind of makes sense because he always kind of represented the idea of like he was this kind of like crazy Batman-verse version of a mobster in general.
Right,
Sure.
Yeah.
So he kind of fits in as this idea of like, oh, this guy is going to be changed by the events of it. But they made him too much Penguin already,
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a shame because it bears worth repeating. The guy who plays him might just be the best on the show. Like, he's so fantastic in that role.
He is fantastic in that role. He definitely does a good job.
I wonder if, because I really like your idea, Will, of what the series could have been, and I don't wonder if they just keep throwing in more Batman villains because it's like they're afraid they're going to lose audience attention. So the only way they know how to keep it is, and here's the Joker, and here's some more of Catwoman not doing anything.
Next week we're gonna meet Bruce's boyhood bully, Bane.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
George Bane.
And then Ra's al Ghul after that, because hey, why not?
That's what I imagine it is.
George Bane is always punching Bruce in the back.
That's why I imagine it's marketing. I think they're scared to go forward without like a bunch of marketable Batman references.
Yeah. I think you're right.
But it's funny. Next episode, are we gonna get Robin? We're gonna get like 5-year-old Robin.
Well, they already no, because
they talked about his parents, right?
Wasn't that his parents in the episode with the Joker? Is they got together at the end of the episode? So
yeah, I heard about that.
Oh, did they do
that? He can't have been born yet. Not unless they do a time jump.
That they brought in the Graysons. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
I wish they would take lessons from the writers over at Arrow, which know how to drop Easter eggs really, really well without it like consuming the series.
Right.
Yeah. Or like what Agent Carter did with, the Black Widow program and all that stuff.
Like, yeah, the Black Widow program. Like, again, I was watching the show and I totally missed that reference. And then it didn't even occur to me till you brought it up that, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And it totally makes sense within the context of the universe in the show. It's not something that's just shoehorned in to say, hey, remember the Avengers?
Yeah, it's something that actually enriches the MCU and makes an already established character even more intriguing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So that's an excellent example of a good reference.
For sure.
Yeah. So they introduced Tommy Joker,
Tommy Joker, okay,
a little troubled boy at Bruce's school who likes to wear makeup and gets in trouble and has a really weird laugh.
Oh, no worries. They've already introduced the Joker, and he apparently is much older than that.
Okay.
My favorite
Tommy Joker
always be the Riddler as the forensics guy who pops up to say, guess what? I'm the Riddler.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing at this point, because he's been crushing on this girl who keeps winding up dating all these other police officers, I'm guessing that he's going to kill her, and that's going to send him down the path of officially becoming the Riddler.
Oh, of course.
Which strikes me as the type that would take the cliched routes.
Yeah.
We still need George Bane and Victor Freeze come in.
Man,
Victor
who else
Freeze,
is
it'll be
left?
based on the Arnold Schwarzenegger Victor Freeze.
Based on the Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Please no.
Have either of you ever seen the YouTube, what was it, the Batman and Robin musical, like YouTube thing, where they took the footage from the movie and they made like a musical version of it?
Is that the one where he's singing Let It Go?
No,
Okay.
he's like, Batman, you son of a bitch.
You know, it would actually be kind of appropriate for that movie. That movie definitely has an inappropriate level of theatricality to it.
Yeah, it totally fits it. You should check it out. It's just a Batman and Robin musical. It's a group of guys. They've done a bunch of them. They're really funny. They did like a Predator musical.
I saw the Predator musical.
Yeah, they've done a bunch of ones with Schwarzenegger because they have a great singing Arnold Schwarzenegger impression.
Yeah.
So they've done that. They did what was it? They did one. It was called a Neeson season. It was about how every year there's a time of year where like a Liam Neeson movie comes out,
and it's always like, about him like taking revenge on people for doing terrible things to him, right?
Yeah. So they made like one where it was like the Neeson season, and they even did one. They did a really funny one with Schindler's List as a musical. And
gosh.
They had with like the one Nazi guy who was like looking around the concentration camp, and in the somber voice he's singing, he's all, Jews, everywhere I look I'm seeing Jews. It's terrible. It's really funny. But they did a Batman and Robin one, and that's kind of when I watch it, because I never watched Batman and Robin. When I watched that kind of preview, that's like my exposure to Batman and Robin.
I think of Batman and Robin. That is a vital experience to any comic book movie lover. I mean, if you're gonna watch movies like X-Men: The Last Stand and Spider-Man 3, you gotta include Batman and Robin in there somewhere.
Definitely. The best comedy of the 90s, for sure. I actually saw Batman and Robin in the theater.
So did I.
I was so angry at Schumacher by that point that I could not stomach going to see that. I think that anger's died down a bit. I could watch it now if I wanted to, but at the time I was just furious with him over. I thought a lot of people go like, that was the one where it sucked, and I'm like, Batman Forever sucked too. It was that guy coming on board is what made it suck. It wasn't that one movie where he went too far. The
movies kind of make sense when you think about it in terms of, I think he was like going for like big budget versions of like the Adam West Batman.
Yeah. Was it 66 Batman?
Yeah, 66 Batman. I think he was basing his films off of that.
From what I've read, Joel Schumacher, like at the start of filming Batman and Robin, said, "Remember, people, this is a cartoon," which I think explains a lot. Like he wasn't reading it. I mean, I think that's why Bryan Singer's take on X-Men was such a dramatically new thing, because it had to take something to the ultimate extreme in the other direction.
And it's also funny that in response to Batman and Robin totally tanking the franchise, Warner Brothers ended up going in the extreme opposite direction with the next one.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Warner Brothers has had a hard time pinning down a tone that they're really comfortable with for the DC movies. It's actually kind of interesting.
It really is, yeah.
I watched a really interesting, I don't know if either of you have ever seen these YouTube videos where this guy does these, I'm a Marvel, I'm a DC, and we'll have two characters from the universes talk to each other. But he did one for Days of Future Past with Superman and Wolverine, and they posited an alternate timeline where Bryan Singer wasn't hired to direct Superman Returns and directed The Last Stand, and they theorized that Warner Brothers would have hired Michael Bay, and as a result, the DC franchise would have gotten off the ground sooner than Marvel, and we wouldn't have gotten like the Dark Knight trilogy, and we wouldn't have got the Avengers. And it was a really interesting way to look at like just how many strange little decisions have led us to where we are now.
That is interesting to think about.
It's always made more sense that DC should have the connected universe than Marvel, because DC owns all of their properties.
Warner Brothers has been hilariously incompetent in adapting their properties into movies. They own the DC Comics full outright. Marvel can't even claim that. And they should have been able to do this years ago, even years before Marvel even thought of it. And they just have not been able to do that. The only movies that Warner Brothers could ever think to make are Superman or Batman films.
I kind of just wish that DC just didn't even make movies at all anymore. That they just went TV, but they went all in TV.
Right,
you know?
right.
They're definitely dominating on television. But to be fair, I think Marvel wound up at this point because they got backed into a corner. Is because of the whole, they had to sell off their rights to like Spider-Man and X-Men and stuff. That they were kind of, well, let's see if we can't, now that we have our own studio, let's see if we can't create our own universe and make something out of these lesser known characters. So I feel like it was almost kind of accidental, a bit of good fortune that even allowed Marvel to get to this point.
Right.
I don't know. I think it was a lot of insightfulness on their part because they hired really good people to get involved in that. Like surprisingly good people, like shockingly good, and not good in that like, oh, this is the obvious choice way. Like, you know, like if you were to cast, like we talked about before about the whole casting X-Men thing and how everybody knew like Patrick Stewart should be. I'm not even talking like the obvious choice like that. I'm saying like, you know, who would have pegged Joss Whedon for handling, you know, Avengers before he was picked.
Right.
And that was such an inspired choice.
Joss Whedon was not a big film director before the Avengers.
Well, he's only directed one other movie prior to the Avengers.
Yeah, Serenity. And we're talking the biggest film of Marvel's franchise, their blockbuster film that they were hoping.
One of the biggest movies of all time.
Yeah, and then you have James Gunn for Guardians.
That was definitely another
amazing
choice.
Have either of you seen any James Gunn's movies besides Guardians?
I saw Slither.
I haven't.
His movies are way off of the mainstream path. You know,
he's a B movie director through and through.
Yeah, it is in no way you would think that like, oh, this is the guy to do this. Like, there's nothing, you know.
And again,
Slither, Super is an amazing movie, but it's so off. It's so different, you know.
Right. Yeah,
sure.
He primarily made B movies, and again, Guardians, another box office blockbuster, just blew the doors off.
Cap 2, those were TV directors. They primarily worked on stuff like Community.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, and I completely agree with you. I think Marvel has been really smart in their overall with their casting and with a lot of like the directors they've been hiring. But I still, and maybe it's impossible for us to know, but I just wonder how differently things would have gone if 15 years ago Marvel rather than Fox had been the ones that were making the X-Men movies, or Marvel rather than Sony had been the ones making the Spider-Man movies. Because when Marvel had would they have hired Bryan Singer? I honestly don't know. Would they have hired Sam Raimi? I honestly don't know. But I'm really glad that Fox and Sony did hire those.
Also, it's interesting though, a lot of people clamor for Marvel to have Spider-Man back, for Marvel to have the X-Men back. It's interesting to note that some of these movies they're putting out are largely responses to them not having access to those franchises. I believe Guardians happened because Marvel didn't have access to the X-Men.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, Iron Man probably never would have happened if Marvel had access to Spider-Man and X-Men, because those are arguably probably their two most prolific, successful properties.
Yeah, Iron Man was not a big name until they brought on, Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, I mean, who had heard of Iron Man in the mainstream? I certainly hadn't prior
People
to
heard of him, but they didn't. It's not like they knew him. Like, everybody knew, oh, Spider-Man, that's the teenager, Peter Parker, bit by a radioactive spider. Everybody knew that. You know?
Exactly. So, and I know I've heard people say, I'm really excited for Spider-Man to come into the MCU. I really want X-Men too, but I am so opposed. I'm not really looking forward to the Spider-Man stuff. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised, but I am insanely opposed to X-Men ever returning to the MCU. I think one of the benefits has been that now that Marvel has been freed up to concentrate on other properties without X-Men weighing them down, that means that there's just one studio that's solely devoted to X-Men, and X-Men has greatly benefited from it.
I agree. I also believe X-Men works better as its own universe, not connected to the Marvel universe. Cause
it's such a big universe already.
Yeah, it's such a big universe. X-Men is like...
And it's kind of less connected than the others already. You know what I mean? If you look at, like, you'd say, like, oh, Spider-Man, like, well, who are the big Spider-Man villains? You get into them, and they kind of tie more into things. You look at, like, X-Men, the big X-Men, they're pretty much exclusive to X-Men. You know?
Yeah.
Their big villains, their big things, their big kind of themes are kind of exclusive to just mutants.
think
you
when
know?
you think of like the X-Men in the larger context of the Marvel Universe, the X-Men are supposed to be hated by humanity because they're these freaks with like superpowers, but then in the same world you got the Avengers, who everybody loves. And how does the average person know to differentiate between Spider-Man and Wolverine?
Yeah.
They're like, who should I hate and not hate?
Yeah. Well, and now that Marvel is like introducing Inhumans into the mix, I mean, if they introduced mutants, the MCU itself would probably have to do a massive reboot.
They probably
to explain
why
they're.
I think the MCU is going to change because they can't keep the same actors around forever, and it's not like they're going to recast them. It's not like they're going to go, oh, we need a different Tony Stark now. No, they're probably going to keep Robert Downey Jr. around for
Marvel has
2 or 3 more movies tops after Avengers.
I think Marvel has like an interesting workaround around that. If you noticed, the Winter Soldier, Sebastian Shaw, he has a contract with Marvel, a multiple movie contract that extends far beyond the Winter Soldier.
And people think he's gonna.
Who? Winter Soldier?
Bucky.
Oh, is that the actor who plays Bucky?
Sebastian Shaw.
Oh, okay. I think I'm confusing him with the villain in First Class.
Oh, okay.
X-Men.
Yeah.
Sorry. Keep going.
Shaw from okay.
Yeah.
But Bucky in the comics at one point took over as Captain America.
The prevailing
at a certain point. So a lot of people think, that at some point in the movies, because Chris Evans only has 2 more appearances left on his contract. I think after he has Civil War and 1 more. I think.
So the prevailing theory is that they're going to write Chris Evans, Captain America, out of the MCU, and Sebastian Shaw, Bucky's going to take over as Captain America for future films.
That would actually be really cool. I like the idea of them having revolving doors in terms of who is actually the character, because that seems to happen in the comics a lot.
It does.
Yeah, but that's what I was saying, that's like an interesting thing about the MCU being able to kind of morph as it grows, because it kind of has to. They can't just go we're going to reboot it and do another origin story, because then they have to reboot everything.
Right.
Sure. So instead, they're just kind of going through this is the run for Tony Stark, We have plenty of other characters, Maybe we'll bring in War Machine as a similar character type, or, they're bringing in Ant-Man now, who's a similar type as far as a, not power-wise like Iron Man, but like a Tony Stark type as far as he's an inventor and,
I think they're setting themselves up for a situation where when an actor wants to leave, they don't have to recast the character. They just replace the character with another character that's similar.
And that's for the best, because no audience in the next 10 years is going to accept anyone other than Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark.
Right.
Yeah, and they can't do that. Like I said, they've made everything so interconnected that they just can't replace that.
Right.
They can't reboot something. I mean,
yeah.
The only kind of thing they could do that with is by disacknowledging. They've kind of already passed that point, but with the Incredible Hulk, they've had 2 different actors play him, and the ones that officially tie into the MCU.
Yeah, they had that situation twice. First with Ed Norton and the Hulk, and then with Don Cheadle being the second person to play War Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're kind of getting past that point now, where they've gotten so big now that stuff is getting much more noticed.
Yeah, before they just kind of ignored it, just went ahead and recast and just kind of ignored it, pretended it didn't happen, and went forward. But
to be fair,
they're getting to a point.
They did the same
that.
thing with one of Thor's friends in the Thor movies, and I don't think anyone noticed.
No, I don't think.
I can't remember the actor's name, but I think it's.
I know in the second one it was Zachary Levi.
And then the first one it's Josh Dallas.
Oh, yep.
And nobody noticed.
But both of them were just channeling Ewan McGregor anyway.
I think they'll continue to do this with minor characters because it's pretty much unavoidable. But for the major characters like Captain America or Iron Man, I believe their strategy is to transition them into new characters rather than do recastings, because they want to avoid the awkwardness that a recast would bring.
Oh, that's a great idea. And they have the benefit of not only an endless universe, but also they've well established that they can turn plenty of lesser known characters and give them hit movies.
And they're trying with some of the ones too. I mean, we always say Iron Man is the one because it was lesser known, but Guardians was much lesser known than even Iron Man.
Yeah,
and that was a
seriously.
huge hit. And now they're going to be doing Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And that's another one. That's weird. And the cool thing is
Benedict
that Marvel's,
Cumberbatch.
and Marvel's universe is kind of divided into like, you know, these different ones. There's kind of like the galactic universe, and there's the mystical universe, and there's the air ones. They haven't really touched on the mystical side, but they're going to be doing Doctor Strange, and he's the one that ties into all that. So they're kind of introducing like a whole other, you know, part of it. It's like they did with the galactic side with Guardians, you know?
Yeah.
So they're kind of like opening up new like wings of their giant mansion, you know?
Yeah, it's exciting. I think that's one of the most exciting aspects of the development of the MCU is like they are taking huge risks, and it's really fun to see.
And it's paying off for them too. Guardians was a huge hit. If you asked anybody before Guardians came out, if you told people that Marvel is going to make a movie starring a green guy, a tree, and a talking raccoon, and it was going to be like the #1 movie of the summer for 2014.
Hey, now. Green Girl.
Oh, yeah, Green Girl.
Red Guy.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Of,
Red Guy.
Oh, that's right. He's red.
I think in some of the comic books he's like green or something. I could swear I seen pictures where he was green. But
that's very possible. It actually makes me wish that I don't know if Fox would do this, but it makes me wish that X-Men could get into its own cinematic universe, because I really wish we could have seen the Dark Phoenix saga as it's properly supposed to be, involving aliens and the Phoenix Force.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
As opposed to Jean Grey just possessed by something evil and walking around and glowering at people.
Because Brett Ratner didn't know where to take that. Because Bryan Singer was like setting that up in X2 and then he left.
Yeah. Well, from my understanding, what happened was they brought in Simon Kinberg to write it. And they really wanted him to do the Cure storyline, and he said, but the second movie is set up for the Dark Phoenix storyline. So they said, okay, go ahead and do both. And as a result, they were both terrible.
Bryan Singer left for Superman and made the worst possible choice for world building. I know, instead of making a new adaptation of a character that's been around in comics for 75 years, I'm going to just do a direct sequel to the 1977 Superman movie, including the same font and intro and music.
I get the impression Bryan Singer is a big Superman fan.
He is. And then make it as boring as possible.
To be fair, I think a fair amount of that is just inherent to Superman in general. I feel like, I've probably said this before, but I feel like he's unadaptable for the 21st century.
I don't know about that. I think there's a way you can adapt him in a similar way to how they do Captain America, in the way that you play it off as this character that's like the Boy Scout, that it's like he's of a different time, but whereas with Captain America, he's literally of a different time.
Sure.
With Superman, it's because he's from Kansas.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah,
Which is in a different time.
That's a good point. I think if someone were able to come along, I'm probably being unnecessarily negative. I think if someone were to come along with the right tack, then they could probably do something with it. Because personally, I don't find Captain America himself that interesting. But they tend to have characters around him that are interesting, and so and in terms of Winter Soldier, a really great plot.
Right.
And the struggle is interesting in that he's from a time that was more black and white, and he's dealing with shades of gray. You know?
Sure.
And that's what made Captain America 2 so interesting, is that it was really deep into the kind of the gray territories.
The gray,
you know?
yeah. You didn't know who was friend or enemy in that movie, and that was something that Captain America didn't have to deal with before, because you always knew who the enemy was, and in that.
So I gotta cap this off now because we've had about 40 minutes of MCU talk. I think.
It's so easy to sleep into.
It really is.
Yeah. So we need to get back to television. So I'm just gonna use this as the official cutoff point before we find another reason to slip into it. So I want to talk about Parks and Recreation.
Yay.
Now, Will, you don't watch Parks and Rec. Have you watched any of it?
I watched the first season.
Okay.
I'm probably going to go ahead and watch the rest of it at some point because I really want to. I liked the first season enough. Didn't think it was like the ultimate hilarious comedy ever, but it was definitely fun enough. It was definitely charming enough. The characters had enough charm for me to really like them.
And that show doesn't even pick up until like the second or third season.
Right. Yeah, first season is easily its weakest. If you get into third season, it really takes off.
It's a typical comedy thing in that, with comedies especially, more so than anything else, there's that kind of time when, because the characters are such reflections of the actual actors, that it takes time for the writers to understand the actors, and the actors to figure out who has good chemistry with each other, because chemistry's even more important in comedy than it is in drama,
Yeah.
And that's something that's common, so usually it's weird going back and watching, like, old seasons, like, early seasons of comedies, because they're usually so different.
Yeah, like, watch
from the way they
watch
end up.
early episodes of Seinfeld, it's weird.
Yeah, or Married with Children.
Yeah.
It's rare when they can, like, nail the tone.
Also, I felt
on.
like with the first season of Parks and Rec, they're, like, doing it a lot in the style or the format of The Office. Like, there's a lot of similarities there.
And Leslie is way too much like Michael Scott.
Right.
Like, to the detriment of the show.
Yeah, it improves so drastically.
They really move her away from being Michael Scott 2.0.
Yeah, and they bring in some characters that are really good. I mean, of course, the really notable characters they brought in that I think really helped with the shift in tone on everything was, I can't remember their names right now. Chris and Ben,
Yeah.
When they bring in those two characters, that really helps to kind of like solidify this kind of like, family-like unit that they have amongst this group of people, and it really makes everything work better.
Yeah. And I'd seen, Rob Lowe on a couple of shows prior to this where he was generally playing generally dramatic characters, so I didn't expect him to be as funny as he was on Parks and Rec.
You literally didn't expect him to be that funny?
I literally didn't expect it.
To be that
I've seen
funny.
that a lot on The Office, too, where they would have an actor come on there who's primarily a dramatic actor. James Spader is a good example. And then they would come in there and just knock out, like, these brilliant comedic performances.
It's something you usually see the other way around. Like, I don't know, we mentioned Damages in the last podcast briefly. I don't know, have either of you watched Damages?
Nope.
I watched the first season.
Damages did that, where they brought in a lot of comedic actors in very dark, dramatic roles.
That's true. Like Rose Byrne, I swear she does a lot of, like, she's in, like, Bridesmaids and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even beyond that, I mean, it's like Martin Short was in Damages,
That's right.
I think in season 2, and John Goodman was in Damages. John Goodman does a lot of dramatic stuff too, but he started out more in comedy.
Yeah, he did.
Now, was John Lithgow wasn't on it, or was that my imagination? I might be thinking of someone else.
I think you're thinking of Dexter. John Lithgow.
Yeah. You're right. I am thinking of Dexter. But, I've seen Joss Whedon say that he really likes to, when he can, he likes to use comedic actors for serious roles. Cause, like, that's why there's a cameo from Sarah Paulson in Serenity.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
She plays when they land on the planets, and she's the scientist person who left behind the message explaining what happened to the people, and he said, like, he specifically wanted a comedic actor for that role.
Okay, that's cool. It's been so long since I saw Serenity, so I don't remember, like, all the actors, but yeah.
It's really cool to see actors kind of, show that they have this talent that you kind of didn't expect, Another good example of that is, and he's not too often in comedies, he's been in a few here and there, but whenever he does something kind of more in a funny vein, it works really well. It's like Timothy Oliphant.
Oh yeah, again, he had a couple episodes of The Office, killed it, I thought.
Yeah. He's done a few good comedy roles, and I watch him, I watch Conan a lot, and every time he guests on Conan, he's hilarious. And he does, and Justified is surprisingly funny.
Oh yeah, Justified has a lot of comedic moments, despite being a drama, because there's a lot of joke. Like, Raylan himself jokes around a lot on the show. So
I just love how he does things like, they had the one scene in Justified where, he had like, he beat up a guy, and then he took his gun out, and he took a bullet out of his clip and threw it at him.
Next one's coming
and
faster.
He said next one's coming faster.
Yes.
And then later on, like, he had to kind of give testimony about what he had done or something in this thing, and he mentioned that. And the person, like, interviewing him is trying to be all, like, kind of cold about, being very judgmental about what he's done is like, that's so cool.
Yeah,
He's like, where do you get that? And Raylan's like, I think I picked it up in some movie.
Yeah.
And it's just this kind of idea that you have these people that, like, they're these badass marshals and stuff, but they were kids once. So, like, they got into little air gun fights before, so there's that, like, little inner boy in them as well.
Yeah. I think that's cool.
And it makes it really fun.
That's good. That's what I love about that show. Do you watch Justified Cat? Have you ever seen that?
I haven't, no.
It's a good show. I recommend it.
Okay.
Definitely.
Are you a fan of Timothy Olyphant?
I have never seen him in anything, so
Really?
I really can't comment. Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of, he's been in so much. That's like the weird thing. He didn't.
I've been dodging him. I saw his name and intentionally ignored it. No, I'm kidding.
I only seen him in Justified, those couple episodes of The Office he was in that movie The Crazies, which was the remake.
Oh, I think I missed him on The Office because I'm guessing he was in the later seasons because I didn't watch The Office past season 6.
He was in the later seasons. I think it was before Steve Carell left, though, if I'm remembering right.
I didn't watch.
He was right towards the end, I think. It was just a small role. They brought in a lot of people for small roles towards the end of it.
Yeah,
sure.
He only appeared on 2 or 3 episodes.
I just went into the later Office to see Catherine Tate because I really liked her on Doctor Who.
Yeah, she's one of the ones I was thinking of where they brought in, and Will mentioned before, God, I'm blanking right now.
James Spader?
James Spader, yeah. They brought in a lot of kind of like interesting, kind of cool people, towards the end of the season after everybody had stopped liking the show.
And you're talking about, actors who generally play either comedy or drama surprising you, it actually makes me glad to see that Steve Carell is maybe finally starting to get some dramatic roles, because I think that's a good way for him to express his range, because he was almost becoming a bit typecast there for a while, I feel like.
I
felt that outside of like The Daily Show and The Office, his comedic efforts, at least to me, have fallen flat. I really expected. I like Steve Carell. I think he's funny, but like the movies that he's been doing just weren't funny at all.
You know what I discovered, what I really like about Steve Carell, and what I would like to see more of what he does, is he's good in a funny role, but I think he's better in a funny role that has like a kind of heart and a little bit of sadness to it,
Yeah.
I really liked him in Seeking a Friend for the End of the World. Have either of you seen that?
No.
Oh, so good in that. It's him and I think it's Keira Knightley or something, but it's about basically everyone knows the world's gonna end. And everything's kind of falling apart. Society's just kind of crumbling around, People are, in some places riots are starting up, and other places there's like a meteor coming that's gonna hit the earth. And so there's this kind of overwhelming, kind of sad, tone that everything's gonna end and stuff. And this guy's life is kind of completely fallen apart. He worked just kind of a shit job, but, his I think he had a wife or a girlfriend or something just kind of left him, and he kind of forms this friendship with, the girl who's much younger than him, but they kind of just end up encountering each other and becoming friends and just kind of going through kind of the weirdness of, just everything going on at the end of the world. And, it's just about that. And them kind of getting their last moments on Earth or something, and it has like that right balance of kind of sweet and sad, but also like funny, but like in that kind of charming way, like somebody you really know who's, it's almost like it's the real impression of what a comedian's like, but it's what he plays, like, cause if you watch like a Robin Williams movie or something, he's just over the top and big and, all over the place, but then you hear about, Robin Williams' life, like prior to his suicide, and it's somebody who struggled with depression, but at the same time, he was a funny guy that liked to make other people laugh. And it's like you hear that a lot with comedians, that they kind of fit into that role. And so I think Steve Carell's good at playing that role.
I think so.
Yeah. It makes me think of, have you seen Dan in real life?
I haven't.
No, I don't think so.
He plays a widower, and he has 3 daughters, and he and his brother, who were played by Dan Cook, fall in love with the same woman. Like, it reminds me of what you're talking about, is the movie is not counting on him to be funny to carry it, and he brings a sweetness and a pathos to it that is very accessible. So that's a really good point. Like, that's clearly a better, maybe even an even better fit for Steve Carell than the traditional Michael Scott wannabes.
I actually think, like, Michael Scott role actually does encompass that too, because the way Steve Carell plays him, there is that sadness, there is that heart to the character.
Sure.
Well, David Brent had that in the original Office too. Ricky Gervais's portrayal of David Brent was kind of like, you know, somebody that was kind of a mess, and somebody that was like, you know, it's funny, and he's that guy that makes you cringe and stuff, but you have to think, like, what is that person's life really like? And it's not necessarily all that bright, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a depth to that makes it more funny.
Yeah, Steve Carell played Michael Scott, you know, as, I think, a lonely person, a sad person at heart, who who was the way he was because he so desperately wanted people to like him.
Because he overcompensated.
Yeah.
He was undeniably fantastic in that role, because it could have been very easy to make Michael just unbearable, but he made, especially as the series went on, he made Michael in his own small ways sympathetic.
Right, exactly. I think that's the roles where Steve Carell, his type of humor, his comedy shines. When they put him in a typical comedy with this character who's just supposed to be goofy, and that's when it falls flat and it doesn't work. And unfortunately with Steve Carell, they've done that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Anchorman mold, kind of.
Right. Even though I loved both Anchorman movies, I think it's not because of Steve Carell.
It's because of the giant fight between all the news networks.
Exactly.
See, I was kind of snoring through the first Anchorman until that scene. But sticking on topic with TV, do either of you watch any of the Ricky Gervais series?
I don't.
You watch the original Office or Extras?
I tried watching the original Office, the first episode of it. I just couldn't get through it. It was, like, so different. I thought, like, in a bad way. I just didn't like it.
I couldn't get into it, but I felt like it was, because I don't have the proper cultural context, because I'm not British. And that's actually why I like that this concept has been taken and adapted for so many different countries, because I imagine a lot of the humor is very particular to each country that it's made for that might not necessarily translate.
One of the things I really like about the way they did it, though, is Ricky Gervais's character in The Office in the UK was David Brent. It was not Michael Scott.
Yep.
And they could have named, you know, Steve Carell's character David Brent. Sure. And it would have made just as much sense in America as it did in England to have that name. It's not like it would be a weird name, you know? But they kept it separate, and because of that, Ricky Gervais is actually in the American Office as David Brent at certain points. He'll show up. He makes brief appearances, you know?
Really? Is that in the later season?
Yeah. And he's like, he'll have like a really tiny appearance. He'll be like in an elevator or something.
That's actually a cool idea that it's an interconnected universe.
Yeah, it's the the Office extended universe, the Office cinematic universe, the OCU.
I thought that was cool because they made them different characters that the shows could coexist together. I thought that was an inspired idea. I'm pretty sure Ricky Gervais is the one who came up with that idea to make the Office US characters.
He's a very smart guy, and he's very funny.
He really is.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend, if you haven't, you know, the original Office it's a little tricky to get through, you know. I'd highly recommend Extras, though. That's on HBO, so if you have HBO and you have HBO Go and stuff, then you can do that. Or if you get the new HBO streaming service when that comes out, which that was just announced, by the way, that it's going to be, I think, $15 a month.
Yeah.
That's right. So that people will finally stop pirating Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
And it's actually supposed to be decent, whereas HBO Go is pretty bad streaming quality and everything. But
I'm looking forward to it. I think that's the last piece of the puzzle that I needed to get
if you get that, check out Extras, because that's on that HBO service. It's an HBO show. It's, or if you have Amazon Prime, I think that's on there too.
Okay.
I think so, yeah. But Extras, yeah, it's really good. It's Ricky Gervais, and he's playing a movie extra in the UK, and there's lots of guest appearances by big stars, like playing themselves. Orlando Bloom, Ben Stiller, Samuel L.
I think
Jackson.
I saw, like, on the internet, like on YouTube, the scenes with Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, there's Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen is in it. So it's, huge names in, like, every episode. Clive Owen, it goes on and on. David Bowie made fun of him in a song, made up a song about him on the spot, in which he was calling him a little fat man with a piggy nose and stuff.
I think I saw the clips with Patrick Stewart. They were portraying him as like this really horny,
sex obsessed
old man.
Or he was pitching a script where what was it? This guy, he would just look at people and the women and their clothes would fly off.
Yeah.
And he was earnestly pitching it to him.
Yeah.
He just thought of it as something perfectly reasonable, and he's and he looks at her and her clothes fall off.
Wait, that's what I like about Patrick Stewart, is he seems to find delight in surprising people with just how different he is from Jean-Luc Picard.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But that's a really funny show, and it has that similar kind of vibe. It has heart to it. At the heart of that show is this relationship between Ricky Gervais's character and this other extra, this female character that's another extra as well. And she's a little kind of dim-witted, and he kind of makes fun of her a little bit and stuff, but they're kind of they're chummy, and he really enjoys his time with her. And it's kind of going into this kind of idea that he wants to be this big shot, He's desperately trying to be this big shot, and she's just kind of more content and just kind of doing her own thing and stuff.
Sure.
And it's just such a good show, and it's the awkward situations that it stirs up are hilarious.
It's funny. I don't know that's unless you count the U.S. Office. I haven't really watched a lot of Ricky Gervais stuff, but I think a lot of what he's able to tap into that no one else has before is absolutely genius. The Office is a brand new way of examining humanity in a really comedic way. I don't know, he has
a series on Netflix now called Derek. It's where he plays a mentally disabled guy working in a retirement home, and so all these characters, these older characters, and some of them are dying through the course of the show because they're elderly and it's a nursing home, so it's kind of depressing in that sense, and he's mentally disabled, but the whole kind of point is that it's this character that kind of only sees kind of the light or something. He only sees the positive kind of angle of things.
Huh.
And it's just an interesting take on it, and some people hate that show, and some people love it.
I remember that show getting a lot of controversy when it came out because they thought Ricky Gervais was mean-spiritedly making fun of disabled people with that character.
Yeah.
And that
he treads a fine line, because he'll make fun of things like that, or but he's not doing it out of spite or being mean. He's doing it more in an inclusive way, which is, I like that,
Right.
Huh.
So he's doing it more these are my friends too, or something. And it's funny when you watch, on Extras, the one girl, she's kind of dim-witted, and he kind of teases her about it and stuff. And I watched he had a podcast, and they made a animated version of an HBO where they took the actual podcast and just animated it. That's all.
Yep.
They didn't redo it. And his friend that's on the podcast with him is this guy named Carl Pilkington, and he's just so dim, so incredibly dim, and this is a real person, this isn't a character, and the whole show is basically you laughing at this guy for being so dim, but at the same time as this guy is so dim, he'll make these wonderfully insightful comments sometimes, and it's almost that kind of idea of out of the mouth of babes kind of thing, where a little kid kid will say something with complete ignorance of a situation, but because they're completely ignorant of it, they'll end up saying something really insightful.
Right.
That kind of makes you take a step back and go like, whoa, wait a minute, you know, like that's not something I thought of before like that, you know?
Because they're seeing things from a different perspective, so they can...
Yeah.
Right.
So that's kind of what his podcast is about this. It's the Ricky Gervais show, and it's him and Stephen Merchant, who's another comedian.
He voiced Wheatley, right? In
yes.
Portal 2? That's
yes.
what I primarily know him from.
Yeah, they do almost all their stuff. They do it together, like the two of them.
He co-developed The Office.
The Office and Extras, and he's in both of those as well.
Apparently they discovered Carl Pilkington. How?
They were doing a radio show. I think they were doing separate radio shows at the time. It's like a long time ago. This is like real radio, not podcast. And he was like a sound engineer or something.
Oh, okay.
And they just met him, and they were kind of like, this guy is too amazing not to be in front of, you know, everything that's going on, because he's just so weird, you know, like, in just like the best kind of way. He's just this miserable kind of guy. He's like the kind of guy that just always complains about everything, you know? And it's hilarious, and they do so much with him now, and you could see, like, when you watch something like Extras, and you see, like, he has this great relationship with this kind of dim-witted colleague that he kind of teases and stuff, and it's like, after listening to podcasts, you're like, oh yeah, well that's know, Carl Pilkington.
And he's even got his own show now, Carl Pilkington.
Yeah, he had a few, but he had An Idiot Abroad, which was a travel show where it was basically Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant sending Carl Pilkington around the world to these wonderful places, but specifically sending him out to be miserable. They're trying to make him miserable, because Carl Pilkington's like the kind of guy that, like, his idea of, like, going out and seeing the world is like going to the cafe down the street. And so they're like, you know, we're going to have you bungee jump off of some shacky thing and, you know, with some Aboriginal tribe. And he's just miserable, you know? But he's seeing and experiencing these things that are, like, amazing. Like, things people would, like, kill for. All over the world. Like, the world's wonders and stuff. But it's so not something that he would ever want to do. So it's like when you go somewhere and you have that one person with you that just brings down the whole mood and just whines the whole time. It's like basically having, like, that guy being sent to the most amazing places in the world.
Oh, my God. I have to check that.
It's really funny, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if I can get anybody else into Ricky Gervais's stuff, then I count all of this as
You count it as a win.
Yeah, I count it as a win, because it's really funny stuff. But yeah, so let's talk. We were talking about Parks and Rec before we drifted.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about this final season. You know, and then let's wrap up the podcast after that, because I gotta go pretty quickly. But
okay.
What did you think of the finale? We had talked before about the season and about how we enjoyed the way they kind of played with her relationship with Ron and the way they've introduced these kind of like futuristic elements. What did you think of the actual finale, though?
Oh, I thought it was perfect. I thought it was one of the closest finales I've ever seen to just being perfect. And given the way they had set up the final season, I actually would have been surprised if the finale hadn't been good. And like, I liked that, I think one of the things I liked most about it is that there's often the way the series ends is by having everyone go their own separate ways, and it's kind of implied that this is the last time they'll all see each other. And they kind of played off of that by jumping around through time and showing that actually no, like, they're going to continue to be a part of each other's lives, and they might even all get back together again more than once, you know? I like that more. I think it's a nice way that they did their own thing based off of a very traditional concept.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it too. I really like that element of it. I almost cried during several parts, but
oh yeah,
I remember like one of the first times was when it was Andy and April and they decided to have a baby. And they got to that point and I was like near the edge of tears, and then they cut to her like when she was delivering and she was in the makeup, and I just started busting up, and that to me sums up what Parks and Rec is, that it can toy with your emotions and then have you cracking up like the next second, you know, tears in your eyes.
And it's so perfectly earned. Like, that is so in character that April would give birth while wearing zombie makeup and listening to Monster Mash.
He's like, you've never looked more beautiful, and then they cut to her and it's like,
yeah, that was fantastic. And I agree, like, they had so many sweet moments. I think, my favorite was when, Ben jumped in and announced that Leslie was going to run for governor. It's like, oh yeah, they're the greatest couple on television.
I love how much Joe Biden became part of the show in the last season, because he was like constantly referenced throughout the series as like this weird crush that Leslie had, you know, that
she was
this
his
weird
celebrity.
character.
She was her celebrity sex list, or he was, as I recall.
And that they like made him such a part, like, you know, because he had been on it like the season before, I think, and like had a small appearance, but they made him like a supporting character this season.
I know, I liked that he showed up for the finale. That was so perfect. And I loved that the show was able to get so many politicians, both Republican and Democrat, to appear on it.
Oh yeah, I love seeing John McCain on the show.
Yeah, or like when Orrin Hatch and Cory Booker, or what is it? They're sharing their love of Philippine music or something like that.
Oh yeah, their love for like some weird cultural music is like the one thing they had in common.
And Madeleine Albright is her best friend in Washington D.C.
Yeah. Cory Booker was hilarious in that role.
Yeah.
He missed his calling.
Yeah, I thought it was like, it's hard to go out well, and it actually made me really glad that the show only had 7 seasons. Because like even The Office, you know, it's like, okay, so it went out pretty well, but it went out 3 years too late. Whereas I thought Parks and Rec went out at just the right time in just the right way.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how it could have continued beyond that, and I think it did it right, and it had, it wasn't just hilarious throughout, but it was, like, had the right emotional grounding to it.
Yeah.
And it was really satisfying, like you said. It was able to, you know, hit that idea of like, oh, they're going their separate ways, everyone's kind of moving and doing their own thing and moving on, but at the same time, you got these little glimpses and bits and pieces of their future throughout, and seeing them, you know, in each other's lives throughout, you know.
And that's what certainly I, as an audience member, wanted to see. I was really happy to get all of that information.
I'd say the only kind of disappointment I have with the season overall is that Chris and Anne had such a tiny appearance in the final season. We had heard that they were going to be in it, and I was excited to see more of them and to see more of their dynamic, and even in the finale, they're only in for like a very short period of time.
Yeah, you know? They only briefly showed up. I was kind of surprised that they showed up for such a short amount of time. Though at the same time, for me, that was probably the biggest laugh out loud moment of the episode, was when Anne walked out of the office and Leslie literally shoved Ben aside to grab Anne. Oh, you're just my husband. It's Anne! That was so perfect.
It's great, yeah. So I really enjoyed it. It was sad that not only did we lose one of the best comedies around, but at the same time was the final episode of Agent Carter.
Oh, yeah.
I know, on the same night. Jeez.
I'm gonna miss Agent Carter.
Yeah, me too. I never would have thought that I would be sad to see Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. come back. I thought I would spend all of those 2 months going, whatever about Agent Carter, I want Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to come back. And then Agent Carter ended and I went, but I want more Agent Carter now.
Right? I think that's cool. I think that's a cool idea. It makes the wait between shows more bearable, I think.
Yeah.
Because by giving you something else to watch while you're waiting for S.H.I.E.L.D. to come back, it makes the wait... Yeah, makes that wait.
Exactly. I know exactly what you mean. And I hope they continue to do this in the future. Like, we're rewarded with one series and then we're rewarded with the other.
Somebody, suggested this with, that new Flash, Arrow crossover superhero series they're apparently doing, where we're gonna have, this big team up with Atom and Firestorm and whoever else.
Were they saying that they should air it during the hiatus of the other shows?
Right, yeah. So I saw somebody on the internet suggest that.
I still don't understand why they don't put Arrow and Flash on the same night.
They should do it back to back.
I think it's because I was talking to someone about this, and it's something like CW doesn't, not that you could tell by looking, but they don't want to become the superhero network. They don't want to let those shows define the network.
But they're making
It had something to do with the motivation as to why they're still
I understand that, but I think that it would make crossover events and stuff make much more sense if they were in the same night, because then it would just be like watching a 2-hour movie or something, special event.
Yeah.
And like you said, having a show come in and replace it in hiatus would make much more sense if they were on at the same night, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would be happy if they were on the same night. But at the same time, maybe the CW also keeps them broken up because, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't Flash and Arrow their number 1 and 2 highest rated shows?
They are.
So maybe they're wanting to spread that out to their other shows. And
that's true.
They want to use them to bump the ratings on other shows.
Well, it's better to have a hit on different nights than have all your hits on one night anyway, because with the programming, it's really all about having a hit for every day of the week, if you can.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hopefully they get to a point of health where they can eventually slip them together, though. That would be nice.
That would be cool. At least for crossover events.
This new show is interesting because apparently, what's her name there? Katie
Watts?
Has been
how
cast.
Are they going to explain this?
Yeah.
Are they going to clone her or something? Because, I mean, I worry any explanation they give could move into dangerous territory for the Arrow universe in particular.
Yeah, that casting particularly took me aback when I read that. I thought there was like some sort of miscommunication. Apparently that's what's happening. I don't know how they plan to explain that or get away with that at all.
No.
It's a comic book world.
It's a comic book.
anything can happen.
True, but
it's true.
Nobody has.
And I will say,
maybe not everything should happen, but anything could.
Yeah. And
I will say, I like Victor Garber, and I like Katie Lotz, and I like Wentworth Miller. So knowing that all three of them are not only going to continue, but be on a show together, I can see how that'll be really exciting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that they're putting Captain Cold on a superhero team.
Yeah.
When he's primarily a villain, or so far has been primarily a villain.
Well, who else is going to make puns?
Yeah, that's true.
Why is that even a necessity?
Yeah, I know, right?
You don't like puns, Kat?
No.
I guess everybody has their own opinion.
Thanks.
They could get Captain Cold and Mr. Freeze together, and they could have a pun off. So you can make the worst.
No, that's what killed Batman and Robin, remember, is that Arnold makes something like 20 ice-related one-liners.
I think every time he opens his mouth, like 90%
yes, that's
of
what
his
killed
dialogue,
Batman and Robin.
90% of Arnold's dialogue is puns in that movie.
But yes, that's what killed Batman and Robin. It wasn't the ice skating henchman.
See, that movie practically parodies itself.
It does.
So I want to wrap up just by kind of covering what's coming out this next week. So tonight, Dig premiered on USA. I got that DVR'd. I'll watch that. I'll probably talk about that on next week's podcast.
Oh, great.
Right now, probably, I don't know for everywhere, but I imagine right now, for you at least, Will, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt should be on Netflix.
Oh, I'll have to check it.
It's Friday, so yeah, It should be. It's Friday right now, right, for you?
It is Friday, yes, officially.
So it should be up. It usually goes up right at midnight, so I don't know if it's going up on Pacific time or East Coast, but it might be up for you right now.
Yeah.
Then on Tuesday is the start of Powers.
Ooh,
Powers.
And so that's what's coming up this week of interest.
And I got my free. Well, I got PlayStation Plus, so I got access to the whole season.
I think
free.
the first episode is being made available to everyone.
Yeah.
Free, and then after that you have to have PlayStation Plus. So I imagine you probably have PlayStation Plus, right, Cap? Because you're on the PlayStation Enthusiast?
I actually don't, but that's primarily because I'm not really an online gamer.
But you'll be able to catch the first episode, because that'll be free for everyone.
Oh, so,
yeah, sure.
So you don't have PlayStation Plus, Kat?
No.
Not even for to have the free games that they do?
No, because I think if they started giving me free games, then I would become even more overwhelmed with a backlog than I currently have. So I really don't need more games in my backlog.
It's like when I got
That's
Steam.
true, yep.
My Steam backlog is like 40 games or something just sitting there. And I keep looking at Steam. I keep opening up Steam and going like, oh, when's a new game going to come out? And then I'm like, wait, I have like 40.
I'm in the middle of like 5 games on my PS3 right now. I don't need to add more to that.
True. I have so many games I downloaded through PlayStation Plus that I haven't even touched because I'm like, I'll play this someday. Sure. I mean, they're just giving them to me, so I'm taking them, but I'm not playing them.
For me, I've been like, oh man, I really want to play a JRPG on Steam soon, you know? Like, I want another one. When's another one coming out? And I'm like, oh yeah, I already have like Hyperdimension Neptunia and what's the Valkyria Chronicles and all these ones I haven't even played, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I have like 200 games on Steam.
And probably got most of them for like $5 or something.
Those big
right, yeah,
sales
most of them from sales.
They're constantly having.
It's okay. Kimmy Schmidt is still showing up as just a trailer
so
for
it'll probably
me.
be Pacific time.
So I guess it's not up
yet. It'll be available in an hour and 20 minutes or so.
Right. So I'll have to get up first thing in the morning and
Sweet.
check it out.
So let's wrap up the podcast then. Thank you for listening to the TV Enthusiast podcast. I'm your host Tyson again. Nothing really much for me to say, nothing really to plug. You know, just check TV Enthusiast website and, you know, like Will said last week, post comments in our articles. They're really lonely without those comments. We'll carry the discussion on in those comments with you.
I see the little zero
and you
next
get a single
to my articles,
tear.
and it makes
So just imagine Will crying.
Like that commercial
really
with the Indian. Yeah.
So yeah, this has been the Weekly Set podcast, and Will, do you have anything to plug?
Not really. You can follow me on Twitter at Voxel Hero, I believe. Yes, that's my Twitter account. That's about it, really.
Okay.
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, so we'll be back same time next week. Hopefully this will be up on Friday. I'm not sure. Sorry, this week's we didn't get on there. Unfortunately, one of our podcasters, we lost, you know, over an hour of her audio. So I had to kind of edit around and kind of like, it was weird. It was like I was like erasing somebody from a picture. Cause you you can't just erase them. You have to like erase like everything around them to make it make sense. Otherwise, you know, it'd be like me going, Lee, what do you think about this? And then like 4 minutes of silence. And occasionally interrupted
You're
by
talking to your imaginary friend.
Yeah. Occasionally interrupted by...
You're talking to the audience. The audience.
Occasionally interrupted by, like, Cat laughing or Will going, yeah, that's a good point.
It's like, have I ever seen Garfield without Garfield? Where there's someone who's gone through and removed Garfield from all the
I haven't seen that, but I've seen the Full House one, the Full House without Michelle. That one's hilarious.
Oh, that one's hilarious too. Garfield without Garfield is just brilliant. I think it's better than the actual Garfield
It just makes
strip.
John look so sad and pathetic all of the time, talking to himself.
I saw the Full House one and it
even
looked like
more so
insane.
than he's like supposed to be.
Yeah, that I want to go
Imaginary
back there
baby.
and watch that. That sounds awesome.
If you would like to voice your opinion, send an email to theweeklyset@tventhusiast.com. TV Enthusiast is a part of the Enthusiast Media Network. Stay tuned to TV Enthusiast and the Weekly Set podcast for more coverage of all of your favorite shows. 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 Of all of your favorite shows.